Hey Carmination, welcome here to our very first episode of our brand new NBA DFS 101 series. This one, of course, as you can see by the title, Cash versus Tournaments or GPPs. Another word for tournaments. We'll go into that here in a second. Now, no matter what point you're watching this video, if it's a day after we upload it to our YouTube, a week, a month, a year, if you have a question after we go through all of the details, what the difference is, ask it in the comments and we'll still reply to it. We're not going anywhere. As you see right below my face, we got our NBA top dog right there, JRueb, who's going to be answering a lot of questions for us. Let's get right into it. First things, Rube, what exactly are cash games, and what are all of the different contests that would fall into that title?
Hey, Travis. So if you're looking to get into NBA cash games, those would be, if you're filtering in your contest selection, those would be things called double ups or 50-50s, or some would consider them triple ups and head to heads. So those would be the cash game categories that you would be targeting if one of your goals is to be a cash game player.
So you just said this term, this cash game player. So if somebody coins themselves as a cash game player, says, I want to be that, or that's their strategy, what does that mean exactly? So if someone's like, I want to be a cash game player, like, what is their financial goals? What is their lineup construction goals? What does that mean to them?
So if you want to be considered a cash game player and you want to play cash games, you're looking to roughly beat 42 to 45% of the field normally in double ups. Or if you're playing head to heads, you're looking to just beat one other opponent. So it's extremely important to be using really good projections when playing cash games and playing what would be considered optimal lineups on a nightly basis in NBA.
So for the first part of that question, so in terms of a financial standpoint, if somebody you want to compare it to the stock market or anything like that, or any kind of investing thing, if someone just solely focuses on cash games, what do you think their investment strategy is compared to tournaments, which we'll get to in a second?
So to compare it to something like the stock market, it would be like someone trying to grind out some smaller profits here and there and have a long-term sustained ROI. You're not looking for those penny stocks that are going to go 1,000x on the stock market. You're going to
Those
be
game
investing.
stops.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be investing in your blue chip stocks, your blue chip players, and who we consider to be the best plays on any given night.
All right, so now in terms of lineup construction, what is one of the first things you look at? So it's like, okay, I'm entering a 50-50. It's, we're playing NBA, we're on DraftKings. What's the first thing that I'm looking at when I'm starting my lineup construction?
So the first thing that I do every single day when I go to play NBA DFS is I open up our projections portal over at DFS Karma and our Vegas odds page over at DFS Karma. Those two pages are vital in my success as an NBA player, and they help me create lineups every single night. The first thing that I do when I open up that projections portal is I want to go ahead and I want to sort by the value tab there on the left side. That is gold when you're looking at NBA DFS players. Those are the guys that you want to be targeting any given night. So generally, NBA DFS is so news driven that there's going to be some players that open up at lower salaries or mid-price salaries that are just underpriced given their opportunity for that night due to a COVID concern, a sprained ankle, load management. One of the a million reasons why NBA players sit out nowadays. So you may have nights where there's a $3,500 player who's going to be playing high 30s minutes and he's completely underpriced, and you go over to our value tab and he may have a 10 plus value on the night, and there's some nights where the value is going to be scarce, and that's where you need to be able to adjust to the dynamics of any given slate and play the necessary players in cash games to create the optimal lineup.
So another question I have here before we go over the tournaments is for cash game ownership wise. So I know you just referred to the projections portal, which is a free to use tool. You just go to dfskarma.com. You just click on the NBA drop down tab, NBA projections portal, and it'll show you all of these different data points. Right now, you see on the screen we have our NBA optimizer up, which we'll go to at the end. We'll show you how you can actually differentiate between cash and GPPs when creating your lineups through our optimizer. But in regards to ownership, so ownership is something that we do have projections for on the portal. as well as inside of our optimizer. But when using those projections, when building your cash game lineups, are you personally, as your own DFS player, are you focusing heavily on ownership at all? And if so, what are you looking at?
Uh, Ownership really comes more into play when we're discussing those tournaments or GPPs, which we'll get into later. Most of the time in NBA, I want to know who the highest owned players are going to be, but those aren't necessarily the guys that I'm just plugging and playing into my lineup. Just because a guy is projected highly, you may have a different opinion than the rest of the industry. And that's where you can gain that slight edge in today's cash games. If you look at that Vegas total page and you believe a game should be 5 points higher than its total, you may be able to bake that into your own personal projections, or adjust our projections accordingly, which do value Vegas odds heavily, and make decisions based on that. Some nights will be completely different than others, where we may have 4 games with over a 230 total. Some other nights we may only have 1 game, and the pickings may be slim to get exposure to that game environment. And you might be willing to eat some of that chalk in that 1 game and play multiple different players from that 1 game if it really stands out above the rest.
So you did just remind me of another question I was going to ask you. So this is a term that is constantly talked about, no matter what podcast of ours you're listening to, or stream, or being in our chat room, or anything in the entire realm of the NBA DFS industry, or just DFS in general. A term that is often coined for cash games is chalk. Now, I was going to ask you that, but since you just said it, you reminded me of it. When someone says chalk, what is like the basic gist of what that means?
So when someone's referring to the chalk, they just mean highly owned players, basically. And then you'll hear people make comments like, oh, this is good chalk or bad chalk, meaning that they think that player's range of outcomes at a certain ownership percentage is very good or very bad. They may be extremely volatile chalk, which you're okay with getting off of if you think the industry is playing someone at 60% owned, and in his range of outcomes, he has a chance to fail 25 to 30% of the time in this spot. You really don't want to be overexposed to him.
Now, your first thing you said when you were explaining the chalk thing, you said, players who are going to be highly owned. Is there a certain like ownership percentage bracket where, let's say, anybody over 35% ownership, depending on the slate, of course, 35% ownership, that's going to be chalk? Or is it higher than that or lower that for you? Where would you put that spectrum of what is actually considered chalk?
So in today's NBA, I would consider anything over 30% chalk. And the problem with them, not the problem, but the difference between NBA DFS and NFL or MLB DFS, if you guys are coming over from those games, is that NBA is a volume-driven sport compared to an event-based sport. In MLB, you get the big home runs where guys are scoring a majority of their points on one play. You get the long touchdowns. You get 1-yard touchdowns in NFL. Those are all event-based plays. Where in the NBA, Russell Westbrook isn't scoring 30 fantasy points on one dunk. He has to accumulate all of those points over time. So in NBA DFS, when a player is really popular, it's usually for a good reason, unless there's just scarce value on that night. So I would say anything over 30%. And once you hit that mark, you have some decisions to make, and you need to consider the player's range of outcomes.
You just touched on it a little bit there when you were talking about NFL and the difference in scoring, but that was going to be my last question, my last official question before going over to the tournament side of things, of how are cash games in general, and then also lineup building strategy for cash games different in NBA versus NFL versus MLB or versus any other sport that's not basketball? I know you mentioned that they have to accumulate the points over the entire game. You're not gonna get a starter unless it gets hurt, get shut out by a lockdown corner like in NFL. So strategy wise and then actual contest wise, how do they differ from NBA to the other major sports?
Yeah, it's a great question. In MLB, the easiest way to explain it is even the best player in the world, Mike Trout, he has a floor of 0 points on the night. He can go 0 for 4 any day of the week. Is it more unlikely than other players in MLB? Yes, of course. But his floor is 0 on the night. like you said, unless there is a first couple minute injury, unfortunately, we see a lot of ACL tears or ankle sprains in the NBA. As long as there isn't one of those major injuries early in the game, it's very unlikely for your player to score 0 points. Yes, they may underperform, but for them to just flat out lay a goose egg is very unlikely. Same thing in NFL. I mean, we see the injury risk in the NFL is way higher than it is in the NBA. And because it is so event driven, and you may be playing someone, one of these quote unquote value plays in the NFL, just hoping and praying that they can get to three catches for 30 yards. And if they fall in the end zone, I mean, you're jumping around your living room, jumping for joy for some of these guys. So NBA is just really projections driven. And that's something that I really want to hammer home today, is how important it is to use really good projections when building NBA lineups, especially for cash games, when you're trying to play those optimal lineups and beat 40+% of the field majority of the time in order to be profitable.
All right, well said. Let's move over to the tournament side. The first question, if this is your very first time being introduced to DFS, I'm sure, as you've seen the title, tournaments in parentheses, GPPs, they are one and the same. Some people refer them as tournaments. A lot of us just call them GPPs. What the heck does GPP stand for?
So it's one of the first questions that we get asked when people come and join us over in our free DFS Karma Discord. We can leave a link to that in the description, and you guys can come over. And if you have any questions, leave them in the YouTube comments or come right over to our Discord. We'll be in there. We are answering questions all day, all night. We have an amazing team over at DFS Karma over in our Discord. But back to your question, GPPs are what we call guaranteed prize pool tournaments. So basically, when you open up your DraftKings lobby, they're going to take you right away to the featured page, to the tournament page. And the reason they take you to those is because all of those contests with those little green G's that you see, they're all guaranteed prize pools. If there's $1 million prize pool for a tournament, there's guaranteed to be $1 million in play, regardless of if they hit their entry fee threshold. There are some nights, we see this usually like an opening night for NBA when they're really trying to push this massive prize pool. And there may be something we call overlay, which is when not enough participants enter the tournament, and then DraftKings or FanDuel or any of these other fantasy sites, they're stuck covering the costs of that guaranteed prize pool. So a lot of people are very, very excited when they open that page and see those big prize pools and want to get in. And some of the greatest edge in NBA DFS and DFS in general can be found in those guaranteed prize pool tournaments, because those are where casual players and people who may not be watching an instructional video like this or in our Karma Discord or have access to our core plays, if you don't have access to those tools, you're a step behind, and you may want to get into those games with casual players who are at a disadvantage.
All right, now it's on the same topic with tournaments, aka GPPs, guaranteed prize pools. There are the spectrum of opportunity of variance. The spectrum of variance between these tournaments are massive in terms of, you can have a GPP that's got 800 people in it, or you have a GPP that, I don't know, like the week one NFL Million Maker, I think it's like 300,000 entries or something like that. So there's a huge spectrum here. So if it does, how does the entry amount, the field size matter for tournaments?
I think that this is something that a lot of people who consider themselves tournament or GPP players, even at the highest level, they overlook how much field size should factor into their decision making. There is a massive difference when trying to come in first against 50,000 people and trying to come in first against 100 people. Both are difficult to do in today's DFS landscape, but one is drastically more difficult to do, because not only do you have to get a top 1% outcome, you need to get a top 1% of 1% outcome, those 0.1% outcomes. And in order to do that, you do need to get a little bit off the board. You see every single week in these big tournaments where they have 150 max lineups and people are playing a lot of different lineup combinations. Don't fall into the trap in believing that these people will play 150 lineups, have all the bases covered, and they're going to win no matter what. That's not true. We see people win with single bullets all the time. We've had members of our Karma staff win with single bullets in those large field tournaments. And in those tournaments, you need to get a little bit off the board. Play those 1% guys. Maybe take a different stand than what everyone else is thinking. Target one of those lower over-under games and hope that it goes into overtime, because there is a good percentage of NBA games that do go to overtime, and those create upside. And when you're correlating a game like that, that's how you can create a unique outcome, which is what you're looking for when you're targeting players in those high variance, large field GPP tournaments. When you go to the smaller stakes, you will see ownership condense a lot on the really good plays. So my suggestion in those smaller field tournaments, and these are the tournaments where I thrive in and I love to play, use those really good projections that we have over at DFS Karma in our projection portal. And what you want to do is run that optimizer, and you'll see what a majority of people are playing or what their thoughts are in tournaments and what they think the optimal lineup is. The way to get a little bit different in those smaller fields is maybe flip the build on people. If there's two really, to use the term again, chalky value plays, you may want to go up a little bit. Pay $1,000 more for a guy who has a similar projection, or maybe 1 to 2 points higher, but not the best point per dollar guy. And then you come down and you do more of a balanced build. By flipping that build and playing something a little bit different roster construction wise than what the rest of the field is going to do, helps you create those unique lineups without giving up a ton of projected points. When you go into the DFS Karma optimizer, you can run 20 lineups, and you can see ones that may be correlated, ones that may be that flip build, or just maybe a little bit different than what the field thinks on the night. And you can play that and be contrarian while not giving up a ton of projection points in small field tournaments.
So you've been dabbling on my next question's answer a little bit, but just kind of fine tune. So you're creating a cash game. Like you said, you focus on the value, you focus on everything that you mentioned prior to building your cash game lineup. So you have that, and then like, okay, so now I want to take this lineup, or let's just say take this lineup and then transition it into something that would make sense for a 10,000 entry GPP or a 20,000 or 100,000, whatever it may be. So when it comes to taking, okay, these are the value plays, this is my most optimal lineup. How do I transition a few players, a lot of players, maybe one player, whatever it may be? How do you pivot from that into something that would make sense and succeed in a GPP style tournament?
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what I already mentioned is I find the most success in these in a lot of these tournaments by just making these small 2v2, 3v3 pivots off of my cash team. And sometimes those may project 1 or 2 points less, like I said, but you're getting massive ownership discounts for guys who really their range of outcomes are extremely similar, and they may be 1/10 of the ownership. You may have, let's say John Wall is out for a night for the Rockets, currently here in early 2021. Victor Oladipo may be a popular play. But then you have Malcolm Brogdon, who's the point guard for the Pacers right now, and he may project for 1 point less, but he may be 5% owned, while Oladipo is going to be 50% owned just because John Wall's out. You want to take advantage of that leverage and play that lower owned player, even if they're projecting 1 point less, because the range of outcomes are so similar in this spot for them.
Gotcha. So one or two more questions here. And then what I'm going to do for you guys at the very end of this video, for watching all the way to this point, 20 minutes deep into this, is I'm going to show you the optimizer. I'm going to go through. We're going to show you what to do if you sign up for the optimizer access, on how to create an instant optimal lineup for your cash games, and then how to select what type of GPP or tournament you'll be playing in. if you haven't watched the video specifically for this yet. So one of the last questions here are if someone's watching this and they are truly, I mean, they start looking into it, they're doing the research into DFS, into NBA DFS, and they want to make sure that they understand, the entire spectrum of potential strategies that are out there. What would be like the three most important things that you can tell someone who's within their first day or their first month or whatever?
So the number one thing, which I already hit on before for me, is access to really good projections, which we have over in the projection portal at DFS Karma. You need access to those. You need to see who the best value plays are on the night and see where those pivot and leverage opportunities are on players for tournaments or GPPs. Number two for me would be a bankroll management for an NBA DFS player. Just understanding that as good as the projections may be, players fail. I mean, they're humans just like we're humans. They make mistakes just like we do. NBA DFS is not a solved game. No matter what people tell you, there is still an edge to be gained. And over at DFS Karma, we're trying to compound that edge every single day to churn out an ROI and be profitable over the course of a season. The last most important part of being an NBA DFS player is being around your computer. NBA DFS is an extremely news-driven sport. Every single day, we have big names sitting. We have 1 million back-to-backs, especially during a shortened season here for COVID. They're really jamming in games and whatnot. But that's why being subscribed to a service like DFS Karma is really important, because we have a ton of coaches that are staying on top of the news, updating you throughout the night on all the different changes. But you have to be available that half hour, 45 minutes right up until the lock if you're going to take things seriously and you want to be a very good NBA DFS player.
All right, so without further ado, let's do some quick optimizing here just to show you guys how this works. So if you do sign up for this, you have instant access to it. We have several different packages that include optimizer access. Just go to dfskarma.com/shop to see all the stuff we offer. If optimizers in the title, then there's going to be something, variation in that package that has optimizer access. But so this is today, this is the NBA. Like it's super simple. If you are playing cash games, it's 2 clicks, maybe 2.5 clicks. So if I'm doing cash games, I want to see what the optimal is. You just click on cash, and that is all you have to do right there in the style section. And all you do is click build, and it will show you based on our projections and our and the ownership and all that stuff what the optimal lineup is for the night. Now, of course, that's not necessarily the one that we're playing on all of our stuff, because if every single person under the sun was playing the same optimal through our optimizer, then we would all be tying for first and splitting and losing money to rake. Yeah, so you see here on the right side. So if you're watching this on the day that we're doing it, congrats. Here's a free optimal for you. But yeah, so right there on the right side, that is the number one optimal based on just the basic, the ownership, the value, and the projections, like he was harping on earlier with the value stuff. So real quick, I'll show you the GPP side of things. So style, you're just going to click on GPP. Is it a single entry GPP? Is it a 3 max? Is it a 20 max? Is it a 150 max? We'll say it's a 3 max. How many people are in it? 10, 11 to 100. Let's say there's like 15,000 people. So we're going to click on this here. So you clicked on the 50,000, and then you click to build a lineup tool, and the exact same thing happens. It's going to build 3 lineups because you're doing a 3 max specifically for that type of tournament. All 3 of them right here. So you'll see them right there on the right side. So here are the 3 lineups for the GPP, and it's pretty simple. All you do, if you don't, I mean, it's only 3, so you can manually enter them into DraftKings, but if you're doing like 20, 100, 150, just click the download button here. It'll download a CSV file you can upload directly to DraftKings and everything else. So yeah, that's the gist there. That is the optimizer. That is the cash game versus GPP difference. As Rube said earlier, you can ask questions through the YouTube comments or just jump in the free chat room. Just go to chatdfs.com. The link will also be included in the description below. But yeah, that's it. Is there anything else you want to drop, knowledge bombs that you haven't dropped yet? Or is there anything left in the tank for the cash first tournaments NBA DFS 101 pod, Rube?
Nothing else for me. Just looking forward to some of you coming over and joining Karma Nation. Come join us in Discord. We have a great time.
All right. Well, Good luck, guys. Make sure you check out the other NBA DFS 101 podcasts and recordings that will be dropping relatively short. See ya.